The casserole hadn't even cooled. I remember that detail because I'd been so proud of it. Hand-peeled potatoes cream from the market down on Willow Street, baked slow and steady in the same dish my grandmother used. I still remember the shape of the brown edges curling at the corners just the way she liked it. It was my first dinner in the house I bought myself. Not rented, not borrowed, not a hand-me-down from someone else's idea of where I belonged. I saved for 5 years, cut every extra, packed my own lunch through 2 promotions. I did everything the right way, quietly, carefully. And now I was hosting the very people who always doubted I could. My parents were due at 6. I set the table with cloth napkins and the plates I'd gotten on clearance from a little antique shop outside of Corvallis, the blue ones with tiny hand-painted birds on the rim. Each seat had a name card, simple printed on cardstock and laminated at work on my break. I placed Dad at the head mom to his right, and Marla, my older sister, across from me like it was some soft-lit truce I'd arranged after a war we never declared. I even lit candles, cinnamon and pine. Just enough to make the place feel like home, not like a showroom. By 6:20, I had rechecked everything 3 times. The roast was resting, the salad was crisp, and my skirt, which I hardly ever wore, was freshly steamed. I remember smoothing it down more than once, the way nervous hands do when there's nothing else left to fix. At 6:32, tires crunched over gravel outside. My heart kicked a little. The first to step inside was Marla. She didn't knock, just opened the door and said, "Smells like food," without looking at me. She wore those suede boots she always bragged about expensive, impractical. They tracked faint dust over the floors I'd mopped that morning. Dad followed. He gave a nod, not quite a greeting. His eyes didn't land on me, but rather moved across the crown, molding the ceiling corners, the family photo above the mantel, like he was inspecting a rental. "This place has good bones," he said eventually. "Feels like it should belong to everyone." I laughed, though I didn't find it funny. "It's cozy, I think." Mom entered last. She didn't speak. Her fingers grazed the picture frame on the mantel, one of us from when I was 10. Her eyes lingered on it like it was unfamiliar. We sat. The silverware clinked lightly. The salad remained untouched. Marla scrolled through her phone under the table. Dad asked how I could afford hardwood floors. He said it not like a compliment, but a suspicion. "You know," he added, "a house this size is a lot for one person." "It's manageable," I said, and took a sip of wine I no longer wanted. No one asked about my promotion. By the time dessert came, a warm apple crumble with oat topping, I was nearly desperate for someone to say anything kind. I remember smiling too hard. I told them the crust was homemade. I said it twice. Dad didn't respond. He folded his napkin slowly, precisely like a ritual. Then he looked at me finally, and I saw something shift in his jaw. I recognized it. I'd seen it when I asked to apply for a college out of state, when I bought my first car without calling for permission. "We've discussed it," he said. "This house should come back to the family." I blinked. "I'm sorry." What Mom nodded, eyes fixed on the wall. "You've done well, Celeste, but it's too much house for someone like you. It's time to refocus." My hands trembled under the table. Marla leaned back, arms crossed. "It's not personal," she said. Then she stood, and when she came back, she was holding my suitcase. The green one I'd used when I moved to college. It was already packed. "We gathered your essentials," she added, just to make things smoother. I tried to speak. My mouth wouldn't open. My voice curled up inside my chest and refused to come out. "I'm the legal owner," I whispered finally. Dad's smile was thin. "We'll sort that." No one raised their voice. No one cried. But something far louder had already happened. I picked up my phone and keys and laid them gently on the table right next to my untouched wine glass. Then I walked out. Outside, the air was colder than it should have been for October. The suitcase thumped in the back of my trunk as I drove with no destination in mind. Each turn on the road echoed like a question I hadn't prepared to answer. I didn't know it then, but the real theft didn't happen that night. It started long before the casserole cooled. I didn't drive far. I couldn't. 10, maybe 12 miles outside of Harbor Falls, I pulled into a small gas station, the kind that still sold disposable cameras and cinnamon air fresheners hanging behind the counter. The overhead light flickered like it was tired of staying on. I parked under it, engine off, hands still locked around the steering wheel as if I needed it to anchor me to something solid. The suitcase thudded quietly with each movement, a dull reminder in the trunk. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. My voice was quieter than I expected. "This is Celeste." A pause, then a voice, cheerful, too cheerful. "Hi, Ms. Whitmore, this is Chelsea from Cascade State Mortgage. I'm calling to confirm a request that came through this weekend regarding changes to your mortgage account." My stomach tightened. "What kind of changes?" "Well," she said, her tone shifting slightly, "there was a request to add 2 co-borrowers to your existing loan and to update the primary contact to someone named Marla Whitmore. The submission raised some red flags on our end, mostly because it didn't come through the secure portal and it didn't match your typical access pattern." My heart was pounding now, but my voice stayed even. "I didn't authorize any changes. I haven't shared access with anyone." Another pause. "That's what we figured," she said. "We haven't processed anything. You're still listed as the sole legal owner, no co-borrowers, no secondary contacts. But for your protection, we've temporarily locked the account and logged the attempted change." My mouth was dry. "Do you have the names they used?" "Yes, Edward and Marla Whitmore." I didn't respond right away. It wasn't shock that kept me quiet. It was the strange, steady realization that I wasn't surprised. I thanked her requested written documentation and ended the call. The car was silent again, except for the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. I stared out at the empty parking lot, my reflection faint in the windshield. They weren't reacting to anything. They had been planning this. This wasn't heat-of-the-moment family dysfunction. It was a blueprint, a long one. And I, trying to please them, trying to serve casserole and earn a smile, had walked right into it. I reached for my phone again, not to call anyone, but to scroll through old photos. Ones taken just weeks ago. Me standing on the porch with the sold sign holding keys, smiling like I believed the house was mine. It was mine. Still was. But they didn't think I'd fight for it, and they certainly didn't think I'd document everything. I didn't know it yet, but that phone call had already changed the outcome. Because now I wasn't confused. I was aware. And awareness, I would learn, is the first real weapon. It was still early the next morning when I drove back toward my house. I hadn't slept, not really. I'd dozed off in the car for maybe an hour before the cold in my spine reminded me I was no longer welcome in the place I paid for. But I needed something papers, chargers, even just a sweater. Something familiar. As I pulled onto my street, the sun was just starting to rise. The houses on my block were lit with soft porch lights, windows framed with curtains that hadn't changed overnight. But mine was different. The porch light had been swapped. The warm amber bulb I'd chosen was now a sterile white-blue glow that felt more like a dentist's office than a home. The potted rosemary I'd grown from seed was gone. In its place was a plastic fern in a chipped planter I'd never seen before. I parked across the street and sat for a moment just looking. The curtains were different. The blinds were drawn tightly like the house itself was hiding something. I walked up slowly, heart heavy but hands steady. I still had my copy of the key. I hadn't dared try it yesterday. I slipped it into the lock. It didn't turn. No resistance, no clunk. Just a quiet finality like the lock no longer recognized me. I pulled the key out and stared at it, and then the door opened. A woman I didn't know stood in the threshold barefoot wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. She couldn't have been more than 22. She looked me up and down with the kind of glance you use on someone who's selling magazines door to door. "Can I help you?" I swallowed. "This is my house." She raised an eyebrow. "You're Celeste." I nodded. Her face didn't change. "They told me you wouldn't be back." "Who told you Marla and Edward? Said you left voluntarily? That you were having stability issues." I felt my stomach knot, not in surprise, but in the confirmation of what I already suspected. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of the hallway. My hallway. But not mine anymore. The photo wall had changed. Gone were the framed prints of Oregon coastlines I'd taken during solo hikes. In their place were stock photos of flower fields and a canvas with a quote about family. A quote I didn't believe. "I'm going to need you to leave," the girl said. I was told not to let anyone in. I stepped back without a word. There was no point in arguing with someone who wasn't even part of the play. They were just reading the script they were handed. As I turned to walk away, my heels tapped softly against the concrete too loud in the early morning hush. Across the street, Mrs. Denham was walking her spaniel bundled in a fleece robe. "Morning Celeste," she called, like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't just been shut out of my own life. I nodded. That was all I could manage. When I reached my car, I sat for a moment before pulling away. Inside, it was so quiet, it almost hurt. That stranger in the doorway wasn't the problem. She was just a symptom. The real issue was behind her behind the door that no longer opened for me. The problem was how easily they'd rewritten my place in the story, and how quietly the world was prepared to let them. I spent that night on Raina's couch. She didn't ask for details, not at first. She just made a pot of peppermint tea, the kind I used to keep in my kitchen, and left it on the side table next to a folded blanket. "I'm here when you're ready," she said simply. I wasn't ready yet, but I wasn't lost either. By midnight, the apartment had gone quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I sat cross-legged under the throw blanket laptop open on my knees. I hadn't touched most of my old cloud folders in months. They were mostly filled with paperwork, scanned documents from closing day tax records, insurance confirmations. Things I filed out of obligation, not urgency. But one folder caught my eye. Interior cam backups. I had nearly forgotten it existed. The cameras were my idea back when I first moved in. Not for security exactly, but peace of mind. A couple small motion-activated lenses tucked near the front hallway and office enough to monitor for deliveries or in case someone tripped the breaker while I was away. They were synced to my cloud set to auto-upload clips when triggered. I hadn't reviewed them since early fall. But now? I clicked. The first video was time-stamped 2 days before the dinner. It opened with a quiet shot of the hallway, then movement. Marla standing in my office, casually opening drawers, not rifling, not searching, just calmly removing files, flipping through them, placing them in a box already labeled in her handwriting. Another clip, my mother Diane removing my framed degree from the wall, tucking it under her arm. She took a moment to smooth the dust from the now empty space. Then my father. Edward entered last, sat at my desk like he owned it. He leaned back in my chair, tested the tilt, then reached behind the monitor and unplugged the router. In his hand, he held a new device wrapped in masking tape. On it, in faded marker, was written Whitmore, Maine. They weren't trespassing. They were settling in, replacing the things I had chosen with the things they thought fit better. No panic, no rush. Just deliberate motion. Like the house had already been reassigned in their minds, and my presence at the dinner was merely a formality. I sat back, pulse thudding low behind my ribs. They hadn't expected me to notice. They didn't think I'd still have access. They thought I'd given up the moment I left the key on the table. And honestly, for a moment, I almost had. But not now. I started downloading clips, one by one. I renamed them by timestamp and saved them into a new folder. They took it. At the bottom of the folder, tucked beneath a string of footage files, was a voicemail. I didn't remember saving it. It was dated 9 days before the dinner. I hit play. Marla's voice came through flat and clear. "Once she's out, change the locks. Don't let her back in. Not even for the photo albums. She'll call a lawyer, sure, but it won't stick. This is a family matter. Judges don't touch it." My throat tightened. She wasn't even angry, just efficient. Like this was an event to be managed, like I was clutter to be boxed and removed. I sat with the silence after the recording ended. Let it settle. Then I copied the voicemail, attached the first 3 video files, and emailed them to myself and to a new contact folder labeled Legal. I didn't know what came next, but I knew this. I hadn't left. They had simply begun moving in before I realized I was being moved out. The next morning, I woke to Raina sitting at her tiny kitchen table, glasses perched low on her nose, flipping through a small legal pad filled with names and numbers. She looked up when I entered. "You need a lawyer, not just for the house. This is bigger now." I nodded. I knew she was right. She made a call before breakfast. By 9, we had an appointment with Joanna Kerr, a civil litigation attorney in downtown Harbor Falls. I remembered the name from a neighbor's divorce, quiet, thorough, not the type who showed up in court with a loud tie and an ego. Joanna's office was small but neat, with a row of green folders stacked with alarming symmetry. Her handshake was dry and direct. "I specialize in property disputes," she said, sliding a notepad between us. "But more often than not, the worst ones involve people with the same last name." She let that hang for a moment before continuing. I pulled out the folder I'd started the videos, the voicemail copies of my mortgage documents and deed. She scanned them quickly, her face unreadable. "This is strong," she said. "But we'll need more." I knew what she meant, and I already knew where to look. That night, back at Raina's, I opened my email archive. Years of threads and attachments. Most forgotten until I began using the search bar like a scalpel. Subject line: "Can you send over your W-2 real quick?" from Edward Whitmore. Date: February 2 years ago. I remembered it. I was filing taxes late and had asked my dad if his accountant still did individual returns. He said yes, just send the documents. Another from Marla: "Need your SSN for the insurance beneficiary forms just to speed things up." At the time, it hadn't seemed strange. They were family. I'd trusted the hands reaching out to help me steady my life. Now I saw it differently. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were slowly assembling a version of me they could control on paper. "Raina," I called from across the living room. "Can you check something for me?" She joined me on the couch, laptop balanced on her knees. "Check your credit report," she said, without needing to ask why. It took me 2 tries to remember my password. When the report loaded, I felt my throat go dry. 2 new inquiries. One from a major department store I hadn't shopped at in over a decade. Another from a credit card company I'd never applied to. Both submitted within the past week. Both linked to an IP address from my parents' house. I turned to Raina. She was already frowning. "This is financial fraud," she said. "This isn't emotional anymore. It's criminal." I sat very still, as if even breathing too loudly might make it worse. Joanna called that evening. I forwarded everything: the emails, the report, the application attempts. "We're filing," she said. "Emergency petition, restraining order. Lock your credit. From this point forward, don't speak with them directly. Every word goes through me." I closed my laptop and leaned back. This wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about proof. They'd counted on me staying quiet, staying small, but they forgot I kept receipts. The courthouse in Harbor Falls was built in 1911, brick, limestone, and symmetry. I'd passed it dozens of times and never thought I'd walk in through the front doors as anything other than a taxpayer. But on Thursday morning, I stepped through security with Joanna on my left and Raina trailing quietly behind. I carried nothing but a manila folder and my name. We waited outside the courtroom while the previous case was called. Divorce. Something about vehicles and visitation. Voices behind the double doors rose, then fell again. I pressed my palms together on my lap, not to pray, just to stop them from shaking. "This isn't about drama," Joanna said under her breath. "We're here for truth. Let them perform. We'll present." When our case was called, we entered quietly. The courtroom was cold in a way that didn't come from the air, more like a stillness that demanded you choose your words carefully or not at all. My parents sat at the defendant table. My father, Edward, wore a suit that didn't fit quite the way it used to. My mother, Diane, was rigid beside him. Marla was seated apart, arms crossed, jaw-locked hair pulled into a bun that said control more than style. They didn't look at me. Joanna began with documentation. She presented the mortgage papers, the deed, the dated payoff statements. Then the videos, silent but devastating my father, replacing the router, my mother removing framed photos, Marla boxing files. Then came the voicemail. The courtroom remained quiet as Marla's voice echoed from the speaker. "Once she's out, change the locks. Don't let her back in. Not even for the photo albums. Not angry. Not panicked. Just calculated." Joanna let it sit in the room before continuing. When it was their turn, my father stood first. "We were trying to protect what we built," he said. "This house was always meant for the family. We supported Celeste for years. Her name might be on the deed, but that was never the spirit of it." Joanna interrupted him politely but firmly. "Mr. Whitmore, Do you deny submitting false ownership claims to Cascade State Mortgage? I deny any criminal intent, he replied, voice tight. If she had just listened, none of this would have happened. The judge glanced over her glasses, her face unreadable. Then came Marla. She stood, cleared her throat. I was only trying to help manage the property, she said. Celeste doesn't even like hosting. It was too much house for her. She gets overwhelmed. Joanna pulled a still frame from one of the videos, Marla removing my labeled folders, tucking them into a box with her initials on the side. The judge looked up. You believed the home was yours? Marla hesitated. I believed it was shared responsibility. You're not on the deed, the judge said. Are you? No. My turn came last. I walked slowly to the stand, took the oath, sat. I didn't read a statement. I didn't bring notes. I looked directly at the judge and said, I bought that house alone. I paid every installment, handled every repair, chose every piece of furniture. They didn't just enter without permission, they began erasing me before I even left. I paused. My father replaced my internet. My sister packed my files. My mother removed my photographs, and when I resisted, they called me unstable. I let the silence linger. They didn't just try to take my house. They tried to write me out of the life I built inside it. The judge didn't speak immediately. She flipped through her notes, read something on her screen. Then finally, this court finds that Ms. Celeste Whitmore is the sole legal owner of the property in question. Furthermore, we find sufficient grounds to uphold the temporary restraining order and open formal inquiry into suspected financial misconduct and identity fraud. Edward inhaled sharply. Marla looked at the floor. My mother didn't move at all. I didn't react. Not in that room. Outside, Raina was waiting with coffee in a paper cup and an umbrella she didn't need. The sun was sharp and steady overhead. How do you feel? She asked. I looked down at the courthouse steps. My shoes were planted. My voice steady. I feel real. She smiled. Later that afternoon, I opened the email from Joanna confirming the county clerk had updated the deed. My name. My signature. My home. I closed my laptop and sat by the window in Raina's guest room watching the trees sway outside like they were nodding in quiet agreement. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. And piece by piece, it was working. The key turned harder than I remembered. It took 2 full tries and a firm grip before the lock finally gave way, like the house itself wasn't sure whether to let me in. I stepped into silence. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that made you listen harder than you meant to. The curtains were stiff. The air held no scent. The soft eucalyptus I used to keep near the entryway had been replaced with something sharper, lavender plugins, the kind Marla liked. Artificial, unwelcome. I didn't walk room to room, not yet. I stood in the foyer for several long minutes, letting my eyes adjust to the changes. My grandmother's ceramic vase was gone from the console table. In its place, a cold silver bowl filled with glass pebbles. The kind you buy in bulk, the kind that have no memory. The first thing I did was open the windows. The second was to find every artificial scent, every plastic arrangement, every staged object, and place it in a box. I labeled it, "Not mine." Then I moved to the mantel. The frames were all new. Photos I'd never seen. One of my parents on their wedding day. One of Marla with her dog. None of me. Not one. It was strange to realize how thorough they'd been. They hadn't just claimed space, they'd curated a version of life that didn't include me at all. I pulled every frame down gently. I didn't shatter anything. This wasn't anger. It was correction. In the kitchen, tucked behind the silverware tray, I found something unexpected, a cream-colored envelope. My name, written in my mother's cursive. Inside was a single page. You'll understand someday. Family decisions are complicated. You were always so headstrong, Celeste. This was about preserving what matters. One day you'll see it was necessary. No apology, no ownership, just a tidy set of excuses disguised as legacy. I took it out back, lit a match, and held the paper over the fire pit. The flame curled through each line without hesitation. When it was gone, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. That night, I started rearranging the living room, not because it was messy, but because it didn't reflect me anymore. I unpacked my own photos. I found the seascape painting from my first trip to Cannon Beach and hung it back over the fireplace. I replaced the bowl of pebbles with the ceramic dish I'd made in a weekend pottery class, the one with the wobbly edge I used to be embarrassed by. I left it as is, imperfect, but mine. By midnight, I had reclaimed enough corners of the house that it no longer whispered their names, and as I climbed into my own bed, the sheets wrinkled the pillows familiar, I exhaled for the first time in weeks. They had rewritten the house, but I remembered the original draft, and now I was writing it back. 3 days after I moved back in, I got a text from Raina. Brunch at my place, chosen family only. Wear something warm. I didn't bring a gift. I brought a bouquet of pine and cedar wrapped in twine I'd found in the kitchen drawer. When she opened the door, snow was beginning to collect along her porch railing. "Smells like cinnamon," I said. "It's mostly store-bought," she shrugged. "But the coffee's real." Inside, the space was alive. Her sister-in-law was laughing in the kitchen. A toddler dragged a plush bear across the floor. Jazz played low from a speaker tucked behind the coat rack. No one asked what had happened. They simply made room for me. Over cider and eggs baked in ramekins, I found myself smiling at moments I hadn't noticed in years. Tiny things like the way Raina always tilted her head before a question, or how the light from the windows made everything feel warmer than it was. This wasn't the family I was born into, but they showed up without rewriting the story. When I returned home that afternoon, the stillness didn't feel cold anymore. It felt earned. I lit a candle by the window clove and bergamot and sat at the table with a notebook I hadn't touched in months. I wrote only one sentence. The house didn't change. I did. That evening, I replaced the curtains. The ones Marla had picked were too stiff, too long. I hung my old ones instead, soft cream cotton I'd hemmed myself one slow weekend years ago. They didn't match anything else in the room, but they belonged. Later, I found the rug they had shoved in the garage. It was dusty, slightly torn at one corner. I unrolled it anyway. Underneath the hardwood was scratched some of it from moving day, some of it from the dog I once fostered for a summer. But it was mine. Flawed, marked, and honest. I stood barefoot on the old wood and felt the quiet settle around me like a blanket. That's when I understood. Peace wasn't the silence after a storm. It was the voice you speak in when you no longer need to explain yourself. And that voice, it had my name on it. The next morning, I checked the mailbox. Mixed between utility bills and a holiday catalog was a simple envelope no-return address. Inside a card with a photograph of a snow-covered cabin and one line in block print, "Freedom isn't the absence of history. It's knowing it doesn't own you anymore." I pinned it to the corkboard beside my front door, next to affirmations I had begun collecting. Things I didn't believe in fully yet, but wanted to try. That evening, I wrote a final note in my journal. They tried to take the house, but they couldn't take the woman who built it. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, not out of fear, but out of habit, and climbed into bed with the window cracked just enough to let in the night air. And for the first time in months, I slept without bracing for anything.
Lightning splits the sky as I stand frozen in the doorway of the only home I've ever known. Rain pounds the manicured lawn, turning the garden beds into muddy pools. My father's face twists with rage, a vein pulsing at his temple as he hurls my small suitcase onto the rain-soaked porch. "Richard, the neighbors might see," my mother hisses, clutching her pearl necklace with perfectly manicured fingers. Her eyes never meet mine. They haven't since she found the uniform. Behind her, Ethan watches from the staircase, his 13-year-old face a mask of confusion and fear. For a moment, his mouth opens as if to speak, but no sound comes out. Smart kid. In this house, silence is survival. Another flash of lightning illuminates our grand colonial home, casting harsh shadows across the luxury cars in the driveway. The thunder that follows drowns out my shaky breath. 3 hours earlier, life had been normal. I'd returned from my shift at Rosie's Diner, careful to enter through the side door as always. I'd hidden my uniform in my backpack, just like every other day for the past 6 months. But today, my room door had been open, my dresser drawer pulled out, my secrets exposed. You've been sneaking off to work at that diner? Mother had gasped when I walked in, holding my blue polyester uniform between two fingers like it carried disease. What will the neighbors think? The country club committee? I'm saving for college, I said quietly, watching my father rifle through the pay stubs I'd hidden beneath my sweaters. My own money. Independence. Independence! Father's voice had started low, dangerous. No daughter of mine will serve tables like some common. I earned this money honestly, I interrupted. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His face had turned a deep crimson. Honestly, you've been lying to us for months. Now, standing in the doorway, I watch him grip the ornate handle, knuckles white. You're no longer welcome in this family, he says, each word precise and cold. Your choices reflect poorly on the Thompson name. Richard, be reasonable, Mother whispers, but her eyes betray her. She'd already packed the suitcase, deliberately leaving out family photos, my debate team trophies, anything that might remind me of belonging. I look at Ethan one last time. He takes a half step forward, but Mother's hand on his shoulder stops him. His eyes drop to the polished hardwood floor. Get out, Father says. Now. The heavy oak door slams behind me, with the finality of a courthouse gavel. I stand under the narrow porch overhang, rain soaking through my thin jacket. Through the windows, chandeliers blaze with warm light. I watch shadows move inside my family, continuing without me. My hands tremble as I count the tip money in my pocket. $67.35. Not enough for a motel beyond 2 nights. Not enough for an apartment. Not enough for anything. Night falls around me as I huddle against the white column, rain dripping down my neck. Where can I go? What happens now? The reality of homelessness crashes over me with each roll of thunder. I take one final glance at the brick colonial, with its perfect shutters and gleaming brass fixtures. For 16 years, I called this house home. Now, I'm just trespassing. 2 miles and 1 soaked bus ride later, I stand shivering outside Martha's apartment building, the elderly waitress who trained me at Rosie's Lives in Unit 3B. When I knock, mascara streaking down my cheeks, she doesn't ask questions. She simply opens the door wider. Her apartment smells like cinnamon and coffee. Its small one-bedroom with faded floral wallpaper and furniture from another era but warm. She wraps a faded quilt around my shoulders and presses a mug of tea into my hands. Family trouble, she asks, her wrinkled face kind but knowing. I nod, unable to form words. Sometimes the strongest family ties aren't made by blood, she says, settling into her worn armchair. Blood family is just geography and circumstance. Real family is choice. Later, curled on her pull-out sofa, I tell her everything. About secretly working to save for college. About wanting independence from my father's controlling wallet. About the ultimatums and expectations that came with being Richard Thompson's daughter. Martha listens without judgment, her weathered hands folded in her lap. The contrast between her humble kindness and my parents' cold rejection plants a seed inside Mano of bitterness, but of something stronger. Something like hope. What happens now? I whisper into the darkness after she turns out the light. Now, Martha says softly, you build something new. The alarm blares at 4:30 a.m. My hand fumbles for the clock, silencing it before it wakes Martha. Morning arrives too soon after another night of fitful sleep on her pull-out sofa, the metal bar pressing against my spine. 3 weeks since the rain-soaked night, my father slammed the door on 16 years of my life. I dress in the bathroom, careful not to make noise. The uniform's polyester scratches my skin as I pull it over my head. In the mirror, shadows hang beneath my eyes. The girl staring back looks haunted. Early shift again? Martha whispers from the hallway, her slippered feet shuffling against worn carpet. Always. I tug at my collar. Mrs. Spencer likes me to prep the biscuit dough. Martha presses a travel mug into my hands. Drink this on the bus. You need something in your stomach. On her refrigerator, my makeshift calendar stares back at me, a piece of ruled paper with dates scrawled in ballpoint pen. 38 days until my GED exam. I've circled the date in red. The morning bus reeks of diesel. I claim an empty seat, ignoring the driver's pitying glance. He's seen me every morning for weeks now, always alone, always exhausted. The coffee scalds my tongue but jolts me awake. Outside, streetlights flicker as dawn creeps across the horizon. My phone buzzes. Caitlin's Instagram post. Girls in sequin dresses, corsages on wrists, champagne flutes raised in the air. Pre-prom celebration with my besties. Senior year, memories forever. I switched to my banking app instead. Last week's tips, $127.43. The week before, $98.17. Numbers that mean survival rather than celebration. Order up, Mrs. Spencer's voice cuts through my thoughts. 5 hours into my shift, and the breakfast rush hits hard. I balance plates along my arm, smiling for the customers who might leave an extra $1. Coffee refill, honey? I ask an elderly man in a worn trucker cap. Please. He studies my face. You look familiar. Thompson, right? Richard's girl? My hands tremble as I pour. Just Vanessa. Heard about your trouble. His eyes soften. My son got kicked out too back in '85. Turned out just fine. I nod, throat tight, and move to the next table. After my shift ends, I take the long route to the public library. My path winds past the imposing colonial with perfect shutters. Habit makes me slow my steps, eyes drawn to Ethan's bedroom window. His light glows warm against the gathering dusk. Is he studying? Playing video games? Does he ever wonder where I sleep now? I force myself to keep walking. The high school administrator's office feels cavernous later that day. Mr. Phillips stares over his reading glasses, mouth slightly open after I explain my situation. Homeless? He repeats the word as if testing its validity. And your parents? They've made their position clear. My voice stays steady, a skill Martha taught me. I need to finish my diploma requirements. I can come after work hours. He shuffles papers, uncomfortable. This is highly irregular, Miss Thompson. So is throwing your child away. The words slip out before I can stop them. His pen hovers over the form. Finally, he signs. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. with Mrs. Abernathy. That night, when Martha's soft snores fill the apartment, I huddle beneath a blanket with a flashlight, conservation of electricity, another lesson in my new reality. Math problems blur before my tired eyes, but I force myself to continue. One more page, one more problem, one more step toward independence. Graduation day arrives with brutal clarity. The auditorium buzzes with excited families clutching bouquets and balloons. I sit alone in my borrowed gown, heart hammering against my ribs. When they call Vanessa Thompson, polite applause ripples through the crowd. No cheers, no whistles. Just the principal's firm handshake and whispered, "Well done under the circumstances." I scan the audience anyway. A familiar face appears, Martha, wearing her Sunday dress, clapping until her hands must sting. Beside her sits William Bennett, a regular customer who'd learned my story over countless coffee refills. He raises his hand in silent salute. My throat tightens as I return to my seat, diploma clutched in white-knuckled fingers. Across the aisle, I glimpse my former classmates surrounded by proud parents, flashing cameras preserving moments for future mantles. Their futures cushioned by family support, college funds, and safety nets I can only imagine. But in my pocket I carry something they don't, a key. The studio apartment key Martha helped me find, the lease signed yesterday with 6 months of saved tips. The secondhand furniture William helped transport in his pickup truck. The independence I've clawed for with bleeding fingers. Outside after the ceremony, Martha hugs me fiercely, her bony frame surprisingly strong. "I always knew you had it in you," she whispers against my hair. William clears his throat, extending an envelope. A graduation gift. Inside, a business card for a community college advisor and a check that makes my eyes water. "It's not charity," he says, reading my expression. "It's investment in potential." That night, I stand in my tiny studio apartment, all 27 square feet of freedom. The mattress lies directly on the floor. A door balanced on concrete blocks serves as my desk. The walls need paint, the sink drips, and the window sticks when opened. It's mine. All mine. On the makeshift desk sits a calendar, different from the one on Martha's refrigerator. This one stretches years into the future, empty pages waiting to be filled with my own choices. For the first time in months, I sleep without dreaming of rain. In 10 years, I will be more successful than they can imagine. 10 years later, my office doorbell chimes as the clock strikes 9. I straighten the framed certificate on the wall, the one declaring Phoenix Creative and Official LLC before pressing the intercom button. Come on up, Zoe. The woman who enters 5 minutes later clutches a portfolio to her chest. Her clothes are clean but worn, eyes bright with determination despite the dark circles beneath them. Miss Thompson, thank you for seeing me. Your secretary said you were booked solid for months, but... Jessie mentioned your situation. I gesture toward the chair across from my desk. Single mom, graphic design degree, 3 years experience before family issues derailed things. Zoe nods, knuckles white against her portfolio. I started this company at a kitchen table with a refurbished laptop. I point to a framed photo on my credenzame at 23, hunched over that ancient computer, Martha bringing me coffee. Everyone here has a story like yours. Let's see your work. As she spreads her designs across my desk, I watch her hands. They're steady now, confident. Mine were once just as shaky, presenting to executives twice my age while wearing a thrift store blazer with the price tag carefully removed and tucked into my pocket just in case I needed to return it. You're hired, I say before she finishes her pitch. Monday, 9 a.m., Jessie will email the paperwork. Her mouth opens, closes. Don't you need to think about it? I smile. I recognize hunger when I see it. After she leaves, I stand at the window of what was once a tiny office and is now the entire 5th floor of a downtown building. The sign outside reads Phoenix Creative in bold letters. Below, people scurry through morning traffic, unaware of the woman who just left my office with shoulders straighter than when she arrived. My phone buzzes with William's familiar tone. The birthday girl herself. His voice carries the gentle rasp of his 70 years. Martha's already here. We're waiting on you, kiddo. 30. I laugh, running my hand over the sleek desk that replaced my door, on concrete blocks years ago. When exactly did that happen? One day at a time. The smile in his voice is audible, just like you built that empire of yours. That night, the restaurant William chose for my birthday lunch sits across from the diner where I once served coffee to pay for my GED classes. Martha waves from a corner table, her silver hair catching the light. There she is, Martha calls, rising to embrace me. The familiar scent of her lavender perfume wraps around me like the quilt she once draped over my shoulders during the thunderstorm. Our Phoenix. William pulls out my chair with a flourish. To the woman who made us look like geniuses for believing in her. 3 decades of life, and these 2 people are the closest thing to parents I've known since that rainy night. The thought brings no pain now, just gratitude. I have news, I announce after we order. The Westridge campaign won the National Design Excellence Award. Martha claps her hands. Of course it did. William, didn't I tell you? William raises his water glass. To talent recognized. And, I continue, I met someone. Their expressions shift from pride to cautious hope. They've watched me dodge relationships for years, too focused on building security to risk vulnerability. His name is Michael Reynolds. He's an architect I met at that sustainability conference last month. The memory of his laugh across a crowded hotel ballroom still warms my chest. He asked me to dinner tomorrow. An architect, William muses. Builder to builder. Appropriate. Martha reaches for my hand. Is he kind? Not handsome. Not successful. Not connected. Kind. Martha has always understood what matters. Yes, I say simply. He is. 2 years later, I stand in a courthouse wearing a simple white dress, Michael's hands steady in mine as we exchange vows. Martha and William beam from the front row are only guests. No formal reception follows, just lunch at our favorite restaurant where the staff have decorated our usual table with white roses. To chosen family, Michael says, raising his glass to Martha and William. The word no longer stings. Family. I've redefined it in the 14 years since I stood shivering on a rain-soaked porch. Our modest house in the suburbs becomes a home. Not the sprawling colonial of my childhood, but a warm craftsman with character in every corner. We paint each room ourselves, laughing as we argue over color swatches. The day we finish the nursery, I stand in the doorway watching Michael arrange stuffed animals in the crib. The walls showcase scenes from children's bookish handiwork. Mine would have been all straight lines and perfect angles. His have whimsy. Think she'll like it? He asks, adjusting a teddy bear with the same precision he uses on architectural models. My hand rests on my rounded belly. She already does. Emma arrives on a Tuesday morning, red-faced and screaming 9 months later. When the nurse places her in my arms, the universe shrinks to her perfect fingers and button nose. Michael's tears fall onto my shoulder as he counts her toes for the 3rd time. "Hello, little phoenix," I whisper. Martha sits beside my hospital bed later that evening, her weathered fingers tracing Emma's cheek. "You've built something beautiful," she says softly. "Not just your company. This." She gestures to Michael dozing in the corner chair, to Emma nursing at my breast. "This is success." The magazine feature arrives 6 months later. From homeless teen to design powerhouse, the Vanessa Thompson story. The writer captured more than I intended to share about the rainstorm, about Martha's pull-out sofa, about building a company that specifically hires talented people who need second chances. The photo spread shows our bright offices where employee artwork hangs alongside client campaigns. The final page features my desk with its wall of framed letters, thank you notes from clients whose businesses we help transform. What the camera couldn't capture was the small box in my bottom drawer containing 15 years of Ethan's achievements clipped from local papers, his tennis championships, his medical school graduation. I stopped driving past my parents' house after Emma's first birthday. Closed that chapter with a small ceremony in our backyard, burning the house key I've carried all these years. Michael stands beside me as the metal warps in the flames. "Freedom?" he asks. "Peace," I correct him. At 32, I lead a staff meeting with quiet confidence, no longer needing to prove my worth. Emma's finger paintings share wall space with my industry awards. My team, now 20 strong, includes 5 people who once had nowhere to go. We're discussing next quarter's projections when Jessie appears in the doorway, face pale. "Sorry to interrupt," she says, voice tight. "Vanessa, your mother's on line 1. The room falls silent. Everyone here knows my story. My hand trembles as I lift the receiver. 15 years dissolve into static on the line. "Vanessa." My mother's voice is older but unmistakable. "We need your help." I close my eyes, fingers finding the silver pendant Martha gave me so long ago. "Ethan has cancer," she continues, each word precise. "We need $300,000 for his treatment." The world narrows to the phone in my hand and the faces watching me from around the conference table, people who know what it means to rebuild from nothing. The office clock ticks past 7 as I sit motionless in my leather chair, staring at the business card my mother left with Greta at the front desk. The embossed lettering catches the fading sunlight through my corner office windows. Patricia Thompson. The same elegant script she used on Christmas cards and country club invitations. The phone on my desk sits silent now, but her voice still echoes in my head. "Vanessa, we need your help. Ethan has cancer." A light knock startles me. Michael stands in the doorway, his architect's portfolio tucked under one arm, concern etched across his face. "You've been sitting here for hours," he says softly. "Greta called me." I don't answer. Instead, I turn my phone toward him. The screen displays old family photos I haven't looked at in years. Ethan at 13, gangly and uncertain on a tennis court. My father with his arm around my mother at some charity gala, their smiles practiced and perfect. The American dream family minus one daughter. "Let's go home," Michael says, not asking questions yet. The drive is silent, heavy with unspoken words. Rain taps against the windshield, a gentle percussion so unlike the violent storm that marked my expulsion all those years ago. Through the blurred glass, streetlights stretch and blur like the boundaries I've carefully maintained for 15 years. At home, Emma runs to me, her small arms wrapping around my legs. "Mommy, I made a picture with the purple paint you got me." I lift her, breathing in the scent of her hair apple shampoo and the faint trace of the chocolate chip cookie she clearly snuck before dinner. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Her head tilts to one side. "Why do you look sad? Did something bad happen at work?" Michael swoops in. "Bath time, pumpkin. Mommy needs a little quiet time." Later, after Emma is tucked in with her stuffed rabbit and nightlight casting star patterns on her ceiling, I show Michael the email that arrived during our drive home. $300,000, I whisper, scrolling through my father's detailed message. Experimental treatment, insurance won't cover it. The words blur together, rare form of lymphoma, promising new therapy. Sold the vacation home in Cape Cod, still short on funds. He's your brother. Family takes care of family. I laugh bitterly at that last line. 15 years of silence, and now family matters. Michael reads without speaking, his jaw tightening at certain passages. When he finishes, he takes my hand. What do you want to do? Before I can answer, my phone buzzes with a text. Ethan's name appears on the screen for the first time since I was 16. I know we don't talk, but I need you now. Sleep eludes me that night. At 3 a.m, Michael finds me in the attic, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing the few possessions I managed to salvage from my old life. A high school yearbook. A blue ribbon from a science fair. A faded photograph of Ethan and me building a snowman back when we were still allowed to be children together. I thought I was over it. I tell Michael as he sits beside me on the dusty floor. I built this whole life without them. Being over something and being asked to pay for it are different things, he says. The next morning, I visit Martha at her assisted living facility. At 84, her hands are gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes remain sharp as she pours tea from a floral pot she's had since I first showed up at her door. They want your money, she says flatly after I explain. They want to save Ethan. Both can be true. She sips her tea. What does your heart tell you to do? I stare into my cup. I don't know if I have one where they're concerned. That afternoon, William calls. My first mentor is blunter than Martha. They abandoned you, he says. You owe them nothing. The pressure builds over the next week. Mother leaves daily voicemails, her voice increasingly desperate. Time is running out, Vanessa. Please. Then my father appears unannounced in the Phoenix Creative lobby. Greta calls security when his voice rises. Through the glass walls of my office, I watch him being escorted out, his once commanding presence diminish somehow. Older, frailer. 2 days later, Ethan's wife calls. A woman I've never met describes their children, me niece and nephew, and how they need their father. The local newspaper runs a feature on Ethan's condition with pointed references to family support networks and estranged relationships. Sunday afternoon finds me alone in my garden, the space where I've always found clarity. Rosemary and lavender perfume the air as bees buzz lazily among the flowering herbs. 15 years ago, I stood soaking in the rain, homeless and terrified. Today, I sit surrounded by the life I built from nothing. I realize with a strange hollowness that my anger has been replaced by something else. Not forgiveness, something more like indifference. They have become characters in an old story, not the villains who still haunt my dreams. That evening, Michael and I talk for hours after Emma goes to bed. What is family to us? I ask. What do we want to teach her? That family stands by you, he says, but also that you don't let people hurt you just because you share blood. My decision comes with the dawn. I draft a carefully worded email, attach documentation of a wire transfer for $10,000, and include a note. For Ethan's health, I wish him recovery, but this doesn't erase the past. Then I spend 3 hours researching cancer foundations that might help with the remaining amount. I forward the information to my father with one final line. This is a one-time gesture, not a reconciliation. My phone buzzes for the 5th time today. Mother's name flashes on the screen, her 6th voicemail since yesterday. I let it ring through, setting the device face down on my desk. How can you be so cruel? This is your brother's life. Her voice breaks as I listen to the message later. The pearl necklace likely still clasped around her throat, just as it was the night of the storm. $10,000 when you could give so much more. What kind of monster have you become? I delete the message, a ritual repeated daily now. The office window frames the city skyline, buildings catching afternoon light. My reflection stares back composed, professional, unmoved. At least on the outside. Father took a different approach. His email arrived this morning, clinical and calculated. Based on publicly available information regarding Phoenix Creative's annual revenue, $4.2 million, and standard profit margins in your industry sector, 22 to 26%. A conservative estimate places your personal income at approximately $924,000 annually. A contribution of $10,000 represents merely 1.08% of your earnings. Ethan requires $300,000 for treatment. Even a $150,000 contribution would leave your financial position intact while potentially saving your brother's life. The spreadsheet attachment detailed my supposed finances with precision that would impress my accountant. I forward it to Michael with a single word: unbelievable. His response comes minutes later: delete it. Your boundaries are reasonable. What surprises me most is Ethan's message. Simple text, no manipulation. Thank you, I understand. 3 words. After all these years of silence. Through mutual connections, I hear about their fundraising gala at the country club. The same people who once whispered about the scandalous Thompson girl, now writing checks to save the golden son. The irony tastes bitter. Patricia and Richard working the room in designer clothes, their desperation wrapped in social niceties. The family that once threw me into a storm now drowning themselves. 2 weeks pass. Michael finds me in our home office late Tuesday night, laptop open to the Rare Cancer Treatment Foundation website. You made the donation, he says. Not a question. I nod, chest tight. $100,000. Anonymous. Why? He sits beside me, hand warm on my shoulder. Because I needed it to be my choice, not their demand. The screen confirms the transaction. The foundation approved his treatment yesterday. He'll get what he needs without me compromising my boundaries. Michael watches as tears slip down my cheeks, the first I've shed over my blood family in years. Not for what was, but for what never existed. You found a way to be kind without being used, he says softly. Is that wisdom or weakness, I ask? It's who you are. The Thompson Colonial Home lists for sale the following month. A coincidence, perhaps, but I doubt it. Their second card disappears from the society pages. The country club membership, their social currency for decades relinquished. Through William's financial connections, I learn about their mounting medical bills despite insurance coverage. The experimental treatment required travel, accommodations, specialists. I feel no triumph watching their world contract. Only a strange sense of balance. The universe correcting itself through circumstances rather than vengeance. 3 months later, I delivered design proposals to Memorial Hospital's Oncology Wing, a pro bono project for patient-family spaces. Turning the corner toward the elevator, I freeze. Ethan stands 20 feet away, thinner, hair, sparse from treatment, but unmistakably my brother. Our eyes lock across the polished floor. Neither moves for several heartbeats. We meet in the middle, 2 strangers connected by DNA and trauma. Vanessa, he says, voice raspy from treatment. How are you feeling? The question sounds absurd given the circumstances, but what else can I say to this man? Version of the boy who watched me cast out. Better. The treatment, it's working. He looks down, then directly into my eyes. I should have said something that night. I was a coward. The admission hangs between us, all of years condensed into 12 words. You were 13, I say finally. Old enough to know right from wrong. A nurse approaches to check his IV. We exchange awkward pleasantries about weather and recovery timelines. As he turns to leave, he pauses. Maybe coffee, when this is finished? Just us, I clarify. He nods. Just us. 2 Saturdays later, Emma's birthday transforms our backyard. Streamers dance in gentle breezes. Children laugh around the bubble machine. Martha sits in the place of honor, her weathered hands steady enough to help Emma unwrap presents. William captures everything through his camera lens, 3 generations of chosen family framed in sunlight. Michael appears beside me, envelope in hand. His eyes dance with nervous excitement. For you, he whispers, guiding me toward the maple tree. Inside, adoption papers for a toddler named Samuel, 2-year-old boy, needs a home. The agency called yesterday, Michael explains. His circumstances, they reminded me of your story. My vision blurs as I study the photo of a solemn-faced child with curious eyes. Later, as candles illuminate our gathered family, I raise my glass. To the family we choose, who choose us in return. The following Tuesday, a cream-colored envelope arrives, my mother's elegant handwriting unmistakable. Inside, 3 pages of carefully crafted sentences. An apology that circles responsibility without claiming it. Invitations to rebuild our family bonds now that Ethan shows promising recovery. Subtle mentions of their temporary financial difficulties and how family supports each other through challenges. I read it twice, feeling nothing but calm detachment. The words hold no power, the manipulation transparent. I fold the letter and place it in my desk drawer, unanswered. The family I've built awaits me downstairs. The one I choose every single day. I place Mother's letter in the cedar memory box where I keep mementos of my Journey Martha's first Christmas card to me, my GED certificate, Phoenix Creative's first business card. The paper feels expensive between my fingers, her familiar perfume lingering on the envelope. Some scents never leave you. You could answer it, Michael says, leaning against the doorframe of our home office. The evening light casts his face in gentle shadow. I could, I reply, closing the box with a soft click. But what would it change? Michael crosses the room and sits beside me on the window seat. Outside, our garden blooms with late summer flowers, a stark contrast to the manicured precision of my childhood lawn. It's not about changing the past, he says, taking my hand. It's about whether a response gives you peace. I lean my head against his shoulder. I found my peace when I stopped waiting for them to be the parents I needed, and became the parent Emma needed instead, he finishes. The adoption papers for James, our soon-to-be son, sit on the desk nearby. Tomorrow we sign the final documents, completing our family of 4. The photograph we took last week, Michael, Emma, James, and me, will hang in the spot where most people display generational portraits. Blood doesn't make family, I whisper, more to myself than to Michael. 3 weeks later, Phoenix Creative's 10th anniversary gala transforms our office into a celebration of second chances. Crystal glasses clink as I take the podium, surrounded by employees whose stories echo fragments of my own. When I stood in the rain with $67 in my pocket, I begin, my voice steady. I never imagined this moment. Faces turn toward me, William, now silver-haired but sharp as ever. My first employee, Darlene, who slept in her car before I hired her. Clients who took a chance on a young designer with more determination than connections. Today, I'm announcing the Thompson Reynolds Foundation for Youth Resilience. I continue. 5 full scholarships annually for teens who, like I once was, find themselves building a life from scratch. In the front row, Martha dabs at her eyes with a handkerchief. At 86, her hands are gnarled with arthritis, but her spirit remains undiminished. My first mentor taught me that family is an action, not a bloodline, I say, meeting her gaze. She showed me that sometimes the strongest ties are the ones we choose to forge. The first recipient steps forward, a girl with determined eyes and secondhand clothes. When she speaks about her dreams of becoming an architect, I see myself at 17, folding diner uniforms and studying by lamplight. Later that week, Ethan calls with unexpected news. Mom and Dad sold the house, he says. They've moved to an apartment near Westridge. I picture the colonial home with its perfect shutters, now belonging to strangers. How are they adjusting? Struggling, he admits. Dad's retirement fund took hits with the medical bills. But the volunteer work at the youth shelter is giving me perspective I never had. We agree to meet for coffee next month, our second such meeting, less awkward than the first. The following Sunday, I drive past my childhood home. Children play on the lawn where I once stood in the rain. The new owners have painted the door red and planted wildflowers instead of precise rows of tulips. Emma peers from the back seat. Is that where you lived when you were little, Mommy? I study the house, surprised by my own indifference. The building holds no power over me now. I lived in a house, I tell her. But I found my home much later.